All right, this is lecture 2 from module 2. Um, for those of you who've ever seen a Marine get promoted, the promotion warrant begins with the words, "To all who shall see these presents greetings, know ye that reposing special trust and confidence in the fidelity and abilities of," say in this case, Alexander Cornell Doohoo, I do appoint this Marine a corporal in the United States Marine Corps to rank as such the first day of November. It would have been, I guess, maybe 2005, give or take. So I like the words special trust and confidence, in the fidelity and abilities of insert individual here, because I just think they work really well with the civil-military relationship, especially the public's special trust and confidence in the military. So if you think of fidelity as being akin to trustworthiness, it's an indication that an individual is willing to do the right thing for the right reasons, whereas ability is similar to competence, an indication that somebody is capable of doing what needs to be done. And so I look at trust as sort of going with fidelity. So you have trust in the fidelity of somebody, and you have confidence in their abilities. If you're trusting somebody, you trust them to do the right thing. If you're confident in somebody, it means usually that you're confident that they can do the right thing. So getting back to the decision to implement the surge, there's not a lot of doubt that President Bush's ability to effectively implement that strategy was due to the special trust and confidence that Americans placed in the fidelity and abilities of the military, rather than any trust and confidence they still had in 2007 in the Bush administration. So while this may have worked in the case of the surge, there is very little indication that the same approach can be used repeatedly without having a seriously detrimental effect on the military. So one reason for this is actually the same reason that Bush was able to succeed in implementing the strategy, which is the high esteem that Americans hold the military in. So if senior military officers had decided to resign in protest en masse, or had spoken out against the decision to implement the surge, which, wasn't completely out of the realm of possibility at that point, given that, the previous 6 years that there had been a somewhat discordant civil-military relationship, and there had been quite a few retired flag officers who were clamoring for the Secretary Rumsfeld to resign. And so if that had happened, such objections and resignations would have probably given the congressional Democrats the political cover that they needed to block the surge. That's according to Peter Feaver's article. He quotes Karl Rove as saying afterwards, if senior generals had resigned in protest over the surge, that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back in Congress. He also points out that General Casey, who'd been promoted out of a job, so to speak, was still, as the Army's chief of staff, in a position to seriously sabotage Bush's strategy had he wanted to. So, in a sense, the surge was saved by the, you might term it, professionalism or the restraint of several high-ranking military officers and the public's trust in, their fidelity. This is a crucial point because at the same time, I would say there are 3 reasons why the way the plan was implemented might have chipped away at the professionalism of the military and the public's trust therein. So, first of all, a military member's fidelity toward his or her seniors is based in part upon the assumption that that soldier is going to be taken care of by those appointed over him or her. So the generals that Bush claimed had signed off on the surge might have felt taken advantage of, but the situation obviously would have been quite a bit worse had the surge instead of being a, moderate success, been a, catastrophic failure. In that case, the blame for that policy might have fallen on the shoulders of those generals who had, ostensibly signed off, but had actually been pushing back against that strategy. Now, if you can imagine pushing back against a strategy, having it actually implemented, and then having your face put on it, and then having it fail, and then sort of being, tarred with that decision, one can imagine it would be a little harder to sort of grin and bear it than how things actually turned out when the strategy was a large part of success. So, secondly, the fact that Bush decided to implement the surge in spite of and not because of the advice of many of his military advisors, that fact has now become public. So, there was arguably a breach of trust here. Sort of, the public can sort of look at that and say, well, hey, we were told that, the military all signed off on this. This was a military decision. In fact, this was sort of imposed on the military. Now, the success of the strategy, probably reduced the cost of that breach of trust. But, once again, we should probably consider the counterfactual. What would have happened had the surge not been a success? In that case, the public's reaction to being, arguably misled, likely would have depleted their trust in the military's fidelity, and probably would have given them at least less reason to believe future pronouncements of military support for any particular strategy. So number three, third reason why the way that surge was implemented may have degraded the military's professional and public trust. The third one is that President Bush chose General Petraeus to be the face of the surge. Now, General Petraeus was, according to the FIBR's narrative on this, he was one of the few senior military officers who actually believed the surge might succeed. Now, by no account, no one has sort of accused General Petraeus of being a yes man and sort of only believing in the surge because it would help him get promoted. But the fact remains that President Bush chose the general to implement the strategy, chose his lead general based in part on the fact that the general agreed with his strategy. So, look, in the future, if civilian leaders are to promote those who agree with them, and aren't really pushing back, could get to a point where they're promoting yes men over bona fide professionals with whom they may or may not disagree. And that could inadvertently create a perverse incentive that could politicize the military, which is exactly the type of situation that Huntington predicts would destroy military professionalism at the highest levels of the chain of command. So, on the subject of professionalism, another interesting counterfactual is, let's recall that during the very, I guess they call it electrifying Senate testimony of General Petraeus in 2007, during which time he reported the surge was largely succeeding. Move On, the Progressive Political Action Committee, bought a full-page ad in the New York Times entitled "General Petraeus," General Betray Us, a very clever play on his name, and the ad accused the general of, quote-unquote, cooking the books for the White House. So, now, in retrospect, the conventional wisdom, I think, is that the advertisement was counterproductive to the, at least the Democratic side. A subsequent Washington Post article quoted some Democrats as saying that it had sort of given, that ad and the reaction to it had given moderate Republicans an excuse for staying with Bush and for giving Bush and his supporters a way to divert attention away from the war. And subsequent polling showed that most Americans disapproved of the advertisement, and I think in retrospect this should have probably been obvious, given that most Americans approve of highly decorated general officers way more than they approve of political action committees, whether conservative or progressive, and they approve of those of generals more so than political action committees, precisely because the former are less political. But it's still instructive to try to imagine a scenario in which MoveOn.org had been correct, or at least had been taken seriously. And that is, MoveOn.org's attack on Petraeus' integrity was counterproductive because Americans generally view the military as honorable. A similar advertisement in the future, might be able to impugn the fidelity of military generals much more effectively. If the military's integrity as a whole is already in question, if the special trust and confidence the public has in the military's fidelity, is no longer as established as it is now. So, considered in the long term, Bush's surge implementation strategy might seem a little bit less successful than it does in the medium term.